What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I did want to take a look at these skills here in the summit. Now we do know right now that for some odd reason they did end up changing like the overall scoring on them. So you probably did notice that the maxed out score is 128,000 on all of them, which I would say is kind of odd. Not really sure why they did it. I'm going to try to look into this more here, but to be honest, I really don't know why they actually capped the score a bit lower. Like, we do understand that having a score breaker set should allow you to get a higher score, but it does turn out that they most likely were like, yeah, nah, bro, y'all don't need that anymore. So one thing I do want to test out in this, though, is a lot of players might be wondering, do you actually need a score breaker set in this to get a higher score in the actual skills? Because if you don't, that would actually be kind of hilarious. So the first test I am going to do here is going to be in the legend points, guys, and of course heading over to the main, gameplay. I almost said vehicle, but nonetheless, guys, I am going to do a total of 3 different tests here in the slalom in the current summit. I'm now going to run this with just the skilled driver perks active to see what the 10% boost does. After that, though, I'm then going to head over to running a hypercar, which, by the way, I am running a hypercar on all of them. I'm actually going to run one of my score breaker sets. After that, I'm then going to run a regular chemist set, only having the skill to fix it stat to truly see if you actually need a score breaker set on these. So now moving over to the skill here, which currently in this summit is going to be the Chinatown Slalom. I was like, you know what, that's probably a perfect way to actually test it out, but for this, guys, I am going to be using the lovely Magma Edition for all of the testing here. Not really sure why, but figured why not just run this car, a hypercar on it. So the big thing about these skills, though, is do you actually have to have a score breaker on them? And what's kind of funny, though, is I do have a feeling you can probably score decently without it. For this test, though, only having the driver perk, let's see what I get. So jumping toward the end, a total of, almost 8,000 points. Could be a bit different if you go a bit faster. So 110,000 points in that, guys. Keep in mind, the max score is only 127. Now for the second run, though, I'm now also going to be running the driver perk, which is only going to be 10%, and you can probably argue if it is working as intended. I'm also going to be using a regular chemist set with skilled on each part, which is a 70% boost. So technically we should have an 80% maxed out there. Let's see what it can do. Now the biggest thing I have here, though, is if you do not have a score breaker, can you actually run something like a random gold set having skilled on each part? And also on top of that, guys, could you have that and the driver perk? What is the points that you actually can get? Is it going to be better than not having anything at all? Let's see here. Oh, so 11,000 points, around 3,000 points more. 122,000 points, guys, having that active. So I'm only around 5 to 6,000 points less, which is actually pretty insane. Now, I would also guess that a lot of players probably do know that the score breaker is easily going to be the best way to do it, which I figured I would do a quick run running a score breaker now, but the big thing, guys, if you do not have a score breaker, all you will have to do is have regular gold parts active. Make sure you go after the skill part on all of them. Now, you can get it to 10%. That's also going to come down to how much money and, spare parts you have for that. On top of that, though, have the driver perk active. You can get over 120k on it, which is actually pretty insane. Like, I do understand, nerfing these could be something you can do, but let's be real. Do you actually need a score breaker? To be honest, guys, for around 4 to 5,000 points, you might not even need it. There is also one more test I did want to do, though, which is going to be the Bullseye. For this, I am going to be running the regular driver perk of 10% and also running the chemist set having the skilled on each part to really see what you can get on something like this. Now, the last time I did it, I was actually using a drift car, which, with a score breaker, you can pretty much run any class of your liking, but the big thing here, guys, you luckily do not even have to have that on the vehicle, because if you do not have a score breaker, which I do know not everybody has it, you can then run something like a chemist or even, like a loot digger or even just random gold parts on that vehicle and still get a decent score. So 9,800 points is going to be almost half here. 125,000 points, guys, running only that with no score breaker is going to be 3,000 points less than a full score breaker. My goodness, we're on to something here. So the biggest thing, guys, if you are struggling with the skills and the summits and with this nerf, you do not even have to have a score breaker set on that vehicle to get a decent score. For example, on this, I am running a regular chemist. Now, this was an extra set, so I basically added the skilled stat on all of them because I was like, you know what, let's test it. 70% on top of the driver perk is an 80%. I got 3,000 points less on that Bullseye, which is insane. And then for the slalom running this exact build, I was only around 4 to 5,000 points behind on it. So the biggest thing here, guys, if you do not have a score breaker, don't freak out. You can actually run a regular skilled build on your vehicle on top of the driver points. Now, the biggest question I have for everybody right now is, do you actually want the summits to go back to how they were? Would you rather have 155k, or would you prefer the 128,000? But unfortunately, it almost makes the score breaker kind of useless.